way more prize money up for grabs now with VGC, TCG, Go, and everything like that. And
Mate, the
Unite.
TCG is looking pretty wild, to be honest. I
Yeah,
mean, they tend to get larger prize pools than us anyway, but you know they can earn a lot of money now.
yeah.
Which
It's amazing. It's amazing what they've done. Very sad on like the cuts to obviously Australia not getting an international championship anymore, but
seems
it
weird.
it happened back in the day though when they used to have you used to have four nationals in Europe. We used to have the UK, Germany,
It's
Spain,
it's
and
Italy.
no, before Italy we had France
Oh
as
wow.
one of them. But France was one of the first ones to get pulled because the attendances in France were never that big. So you get like maybe 100 max, people turning up to the national in France, and that's a national level event. Obviously, the competitive scene was a lot smaller back then, but so that was one of the first ones to get cut. So they have done it in the past. It makes sense as well because you're putting all this money down for,
Do you know what
a
would make a lot of
venue.
sense? Is that they did one in. I know they have a different format, but if they did a similar style tournament in Asia, just so
What, the
they've.
circuit?
Yeah, I know they have a different
Yeah,
circuit, but
but it's all under TPC, not TPCI. So it's down to them to run it, and that's why there's differences between the formats. So they control their competitive format. If it was TPCI that ran worldwide, then you would see the cohesion between all of the different regions. It would all tie together, which would be in an ideal world perfect, right? Because you want to have everyone playing the same circuit throughout the year, but because TPCI have that kind of control over that area,
the
and
only
that's
the
why we
only
see
the only thing I
differences.
do find it fascinating about the Asian format is that again we're harping on VGC here because we don't know much about. We do know, but we don't really play TCG. But in the VGC, like the formats are so brutal, and the tournaments are so brutal that the players are really good because you just have to be right. I mean, we saw a World this year. Japan swept VGC. They won every category. They're just like they're normally best of one until top eight. They're just different breed. They do loads of different styles of tournaments. So in the sense, I kind of think it's cool that they get because it means that they're really good. But I do agree what you're saying in the sense that it would cohesion. It would make a lot of sense for just it would just be a lot easier to organise stuff if the whole world was under the same thing. Because then I don't know if that would be the case, whether you could play if you are a foreign international in an Asian tournament. But at the moment, you're not allowed to play unless you're an
No,
Asian national, are you, in a lot of the tournaments? So,
yeah,
whereas
you
anywhere
can't.
else, any
Yeah,
of the other TCPI tournaments, it doesn't matter where you're from, you can go play in, provided you can
mm.
register. So, um,
Yeah, and I think I was speaking to Ray at Worlds, and he lives out in Japan now, and I'm sure he won't mind me talking about this. It wasn't anything top secret or anything. So I think that the general consensus with the player base in Japan is they would prefer circuit like ours. They would prefer tournament circuit setup like
I
one
think it
we've
makes
got
sense.
from TPCI, right? Because their qualification structure is like you've already mentioned, brutal. You've got to go through qualifying for the actual event. You've got to do well in online tournaments, which are best of one, and then if you manage to get through those, then you've got to do best of one until top cut. And it's a crazy structure that they've got. They're completely different to what we have. Very very
It's very,
difficult. And I
it's very
think
punishing.
yeah, and I think the thing that Ray was talking about is, I think the fact that Japan had a clean sweep at Worlds didn't help support the case for them to change that circuit.
Yeah, yeah, you're right.
I think if they absolutely got wiped out by, every other, like if they weren't even in the top cut or in contention for winning any of these like different
But
age
like, it makes
divisions,
you
I
think,
think,
right? If they played other format, like if it was a format like us, right? It just feels like because our circuit is easier, right? It'd
to
be interesting,
qualify,
yeah,
yeah,
to qualify at least, and the way we
yeah,
play. Like, obviously, they know how to
100%,
play game. They can still do best of three, but would they be even better in our
yeah,
format? Like, would Japan like absolutely just
yeah,
demolish everyone all the time,
yeah.
or they struggle because they're only used to best of one?
I think they would be. I think they generally would be better, but then it would probably, rather than just dominate completely, it would probably raise the game of everyone everywhere. You know what I mean? It's like that thing. If your practice partner is a league above you, but you're practicing with them all the time, they're going to elevate you to kind of on their level at some point. So I think it would work like that. I think just to make it a bit fairer for that area of the world, you know, I think it would probably benefit the player base overall. But it's not going to change anytime soon. I don't think so.
My only worry with, again, not, it's hard, right? Because we spoke about the whole competitive scene as a whole, right? I don't like they put my money into it now. Is it going to start to attract? Is it going to start to attract more normies? At the moment, I don't think so, because I still think it's low enough that, like, it's a lot of money right now, and the prize pool is still really good. Like, it's insane now. They literally tripled the prize pool for across the board for all competitive tournaments for all the different games, which is insane now. You can earn like a lot of money in TCG, and even in the VGC is still decent. But you know, will it hit that point? We don't want it to hit that point where you start getting like, do you see these random guys that are like, yeah, there's loads of money in it, so I'm just going to play type thing, you know? Like these chess players.
I don't know if that makes any difference though, mate, you know? I think you've got to have a passion to come in and play the game. You've got to like competitive Pokemon. It's a lot of money to invest in just going to a tournament.
I think
anyway.
you're right.
Like,
I think you're right, actually, because
I think like you're not going to just chuck away like £65 or however many that converts into euros away or dollars into a tournament just for the sake of maybe winning. I think you've really got to have a passion for it. You've got to learn. It's not something that you can walk into at the moment and just pick up and do well at. You've got to put the time in. You've got to build your team. You've got to understand the format. You've got to understand metagames. You've got to understand team comps. You've got to understand board states, things like that. There's so much information at a competitive level, and then base level. You've got to know like all of the Pokemon, all of the moves as well, you know, to really be, you know, very good at the game and stand a chance at winning. Because if you rock up and you've not put the time in, it'll show on your tournament result 100%. You know, you might get unlucky, but for most of the time. So I don't really see that. But the thing that I think, going back to that point, is we want more people coming into the format, right? We want, as a competitive circuit, we want it to be bigger. We want it to be better than what it is, and more players and more involvement, more people interesting, more eyes on it as an esport, quotation marks, I think is better, because it will grow the format. It will make it better for the player base. So I don't think it's a bad thing at all, even if we do get more people coming in.
That's not my main worry, and maybe this is just me being selfish, and maybe this is what happens when you actually have a large, when you're a proper esport. But my main concern about it growing to a large state is getting to a point where you just can't enter a tournament if you want to.
I don't think it would ever get to that point. I think it's a fine balance. You know, I've spoke to Chris Brown in the past. The issues that TPCI have with booking venues with capacity,
they're not, the numbers aren't consistent.
They can only base they have to estimate, because they have to book these venues like a year, maybe sometimes 2 years in advance, right? So the only data that they're going off is previous formats, right? Previous years, right? So if and they can only estimate to a certain point. This is why we had, you know, venues last year, smaller capacities last year, because they were basing their numbers off previous VGC years, right? Because you can't book a venue like with 2 weeks notice and knowing that you've just had a brand new game dropped, and you like, oh, well, we've got way more players than what we expected to have, even based off our estimations.
That was nuts.
They've got a 20% growth estimation on competitive Pokemon. And I think this is a really important thing for a lot of competitive players to understand, that, you know, TPCI has a really hard job at estimating numbers. And if the games do better than what expected, then, you know, it's not really their fault when they're like, we only expected like the player base to grow like 20%. It's actually grown like 80%. So it's really difficult. And the other side of the coin is they don't want to overcompensate, because if you're buying or putting a deposit down on a bigger venue and you don't sell the tickets that you're expecting, then you're at a huge loss. And for some Pokemon, you know, a company like Pokemon, if they're looking at the number sheet at the end of the year and saying, why have you booked all these venues for like capacities of like 10 to 15,000 and you've only like filled them like a third, and we've had to, you know, dump out, like we've lost like, you know, millions of dollars or whatever it is throughout that season, they're going to then reevaluate. That's going to really damage the competitive scene. So it's a real fine balance. But because it's
You're
not
right though, but
communicated to the
it's
player
not a
base,
profit.
right?
It's not a profit thing though, is it? They don't do it. They don't
No.
make money from it.
No, but they don't want to be
Wasting
like,
money.
wasting money
Yeah.
on it as well. You know, I think that's the big thing. And so it is a real fine balance. It's never really communicated like that. That TPC have this like absolutely impossible job where, you know, anyone would find it difficult
No,
to
look, I
have
agree.
these issues. And I think it's like it's just hard to have these expectations of what you think the capacities are going to be the following season. But I do think it's something, getting back to my main point here, it's something that TPC are constantly thinking about and constantly adjusting. So as we go throughout the season, I would imagine the venues that we do have access to, like we were seeing with Lille, right, in October, the capacity for VG is like 760, which is amazing, right? So everyone that wants to go to that event should be able to get a ticket, right?
Yeah.
Across
Well,
all these divisions.
hoping.
Yeah.
The biggest problem with tickets, right? And again, I guess I don't know what it's like with other competitive, you know, formats or games or scenes or whatever. Sorry, I couldn't find the word. Like, they tickets sell out really quickly, right? Back in the day, I mean, you used to be able to in recent years. It's unless you go and buy the ticket when the ticket drops, or try and register when the tickets drop. You can't. Your camera's out of focus, by the way. You can't. You basically can't go because they'll just sell out. But obviously, I first started playing, and obviously when you was playing, it was a lot easier to you could just get a ticket. But like I said, now, unless you're on the hour, which a lot of the time they don't split the ticket sales up, you can't get a ticket. That's it. That's what happened last year. Like with Liverpool, I tried to go to Liverpool last year. I couldn't book the ticket, so Lee graciously offered to try and do them for me, but just went too quickly, so we couldn't get both. Yeah. So it's just like, it's just insane. But like you said,
brutal. And I think last season, like, you know, what I've just been talking about is probably a prime example of the growth that was not expected based on, you know, previous years' data that they had to work off. It's just Scarlet and Violet's just done way better than I think what they ever expected it to be. So it should kind of catch up this year, and I think
it is crazy when you think about
of a time
how strong Scarlet and Violet did. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
It's all right. Used to it.
Just now you're making me feel bad. Like Scarlet and Violet did so well considering all the shit that they got. Like it just goes to show how strong the brand is, you know, and that they are, regardless of what you think about the performance of the games, they are moving in the right direction with the games. You know, whether or not you think they need longer development time, whether they should stop making games, whether they should do DLC, whether they shouldn't do DLC, whatever you believe, they are trending in the right direction, right? Scarlet and Violet broke every kind of record that the Pokemon games have ever had.